everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show. I'm Mitch. With me is our other co-host, Brad. Probably pointing in the wrong direction. He's somewhere over there. Brad, say hi.
I am Brad. I am here. Hello.
So here on our show, we sort of take an anti-critic approach where they like to talk about a lot of movies with a lot of big words and tear down a lot of good movies. And we just simply talk about our love of movies, both good and bad, with simple terms like everyday folk, and movies going all the way from the latest new releases to the silent era. So thanks everybody for tuning in here, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on one of the audio platforms. We certainly appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to do all the YouTube things to like, subscribe, comment, blah, blah, blah. It really helps us out. So thank you again. And with that out of the way, we got another great episode in store. Very adventure-fueled episode. So with our opening question, it is, what is your favorite adventure movie of all time? And there's a difference between adventure and action. So adventure is like when a hero is kind of plucked from obscurity and thrown into the midst of an epic battle or quest or whatever it is. And a lot of different choices out there still if you kind of eliminate action out of the action adventure. So Brad, what is your favorite adventure movie of all time?
Yeah, this was another question where I had to do the Google search to figure out what the difference truly was between adventure and action, and then kind of delve therein to be what is the best adventure movie. And so in the Google search, one movie kept popping up, and when it kept popping up, I was like, that really is a really solid kind of adventure movie, and it's the best of the series in my opinion, and that was Mad Max Fury Road. And it is an adventure movie in that it is, it's in my research, it was like adventure movies kind of fall more in sci-fi fantasy style than a straight up action movie. And this movie definitely hits that mark in terms of being a more fantasy, apocalyptic world type movie. And my favorite aspect of the movie is honestly the score. The score for the movie is, I think, one of the best scores ever created, done by Thomas Holkenberg, who's Junkie XL is, I think, his other name. So yeah, that's my pick.
So I will say no spoilers because I haven't seen it yet. Trust me, it's at the top of my list of random movies that I want to see soon because I've heard nothing but good things about this movie, and I'll give it to you that it counts as an adventure movie. I would say it's action adventure, but it definitely does have a lot of adventure to it. So I'll give it to you that it is an adventure movie. So I can't say I have a lot to contribute because, again, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard and seen nothing but good things, and I will watch this one soon. Mark my words.
Yeah. Have you seen any of the Mad Max movies?
No, I can't say I have either, and I think this one for me might be a good jumping on point because it's, modern and it was done really well. So maybe after watching this one, I'll then go back and watch the older ones instead of the other way around. Maybe some people prefer to do it that way, but I want it this way. So my favorite adventure movie, I think, takes the cake. This is the adventure movie of all the adventure movies and fits the bill for what an adventure movie is, and it's just a timeless classic, and that is the movie Jurassic Park. The very first one. I know we're in the middle of a Jurassic World franchise right now, but this is the one that started it all, and it is so good. It still holds up today. It is an awesome movie, one of my favorites, and I think if you're talking adventure movies, it's hard to do better than this one.
Yeah, I mean, when the questions, I pick a different movie so we have a little more meat on the bone when we discuss these, but if we were to boil, Jurassic Park's a top 10 movie for me all time. So if I had to boil it down, Jurassic Park would be my favorite of the movies. But I like, you like to differ it up. You like to give a little something different so that these aren't just like, hey, you like this movie, so did I. So Jurassic Park is it's legendary, man. It's unequivocally one of the greatest movies ever made.
That would be the most boring show ever if we just pick the same stuff all the time. Like, hey man, you like this movie? Like, yeah, I liked it. All right, yeah, me too. So we will, of course, later this summer when it comes out, cover Jurassic World Dominion. So that might be the end of the franchise. Who knows these days? But I think this one has a little more promise to it than Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And we'll talk about, that franchise down the road when Dominion comes out. But I think Jurassic Park, very high bar to clear. Fantastic movie, fantastic adventure movie. And if by some miracle you haven't seen it yet, go watch it.
Oh, yeah. And in keeping with the theme, or my theme, of great scores, Jurassic Park is one of the greatest film scores ever composed. John Williams, one of the best ever.
Friggin' John Williams, and I will say that he is probably the greatest music composer of all time. If you just rattle off his resume, classic after classic, timeless music after timeless music, it's just like, there are a lot of great ones out there, and we like to really geek out over music scores and music and composure, but John Williams has to take the cake, and the Jurassic Park theme is iconic, to say the least.
Well, we may do a split decision on that one sometime soon. John Williams is number 2 to me, second only to Hans Zimmer. But that's another discussion for another day.
Very true. So another new segment. We just keep hitting you with new main segments here in our episodes, but another new segment that we're doing here in the body of this episode is called Their First Movie, and it's essentially the first, maybe not big, but the first major motion picture that a bona fide movie star of today starred in back in the day. So without further ado, let's dive into their first movie with star of Uncharted, Mark Wahlberg. So our main segment in this episode here today, we're calling it Their First Movie. Essentially a bona fide movie star of today going back to the very first major motion picture that they starred in. Not just had a brief cameo of 2 seconds in, something that they were actually a part of. And today, since we're talking about Uncharted later in this episode, we're looking at one of the stars of that, Mark Wahlberg, in his very first major motion picture, which is Renaissance Man. And Brad, you have some feelings about this movie. You kind of hold it in pretty high regard.
Yeah, man. I think a few weeks ago, my memory sucks, but I'm pretty sure I brought it up a few weeks ago. I think it was in our Shakespeare episode where we talked about our favorite Shakespeare movies. And even though this isn't a Shakespeare movie per se, it is the movie that introduced me to Shakespeare. And I absolutely love it. It's a childhood favorite, so it's a possibility I talk it up too much. And when people go and watch it, they may not enjoy it as much as I did, but I watched it again this weekend in preparation for this, and it holds up. And I'll be honest, dude, this is a movie that, maybe it's just because I'm getting older and more mature, maybe, but, the ending never made me, I don't recall ever just, tearing up at the end ever. I was bawling like a little girl when I finished this movie the other day, and I was like, what the hell's wrong with me? I've never cried at this movie before, but the ending got me, man. It was like watching it for the first time the other night. It was so good.
I think there's got to be some kind of scientific explanation for that out there, because I feel like I'm the same way where if I watch a movie for the first time and there's a really sad scene, it's like a tearjerker scene, most of the time, the first time I'm watching a movie, it doesn't get me. But then the second and third, or maybe other times afterwards, sometimes it will. So there's got to be some kind of explanation for that out there. Or maybe just because you had time for the scene to sink in and then you watch it again, that you have more time to appreciate it and it really hits deeper. I don't know, but I will say this one didn't make me cry. I thought it was still a pretty decent movie, and I was surprised because this movie came out in 1994, so when I was a little kid, but I had never heard of it until you mentioned it a few episodes back on our Tragedy of Macbeth themed episode. So, I will say for this one, for me, it kind of flew under the radar, and it sounds like back in 1994, that's what it did too.
It wasn't a big movie back then. I think it was meant to be a big movie because it was Penny Marshall and she was coming off of like a couple massive successes. And Penny Marshall is a legend in TV and movies. I think she's just one of those people that everybody loved. Unfortunately, she has since passed away. But she made a name for herself in sitcoms with like Laverne and Shirley, and all her brother Gary Marshall directed, created shows, and then she branched out into movie world, did League of Their Own, came out with this was a prime summer release. It was a June release, I believe, and it just tanked, man. It just did not do what they were expecting. Danny DeVito is also a legend, one of my heroes, and it just maybe it was people didn't want a Shakespeare lesson in their summer blockbusters or something. I don't know what made it tank the way it did, but it did.
So if you haven't been able to tell by now, part of this is we're talking about the movie itself, and we'll get to talking about Mark Wahlberg specifically in this movie in a second. So we're kind of splitting it down the middle with, like, we're talking about the movie itself, and then we're talking about the actor's role that we're kind of featuring in their first movie, this segment. So we'll get to Mark Wahlberg in a second. But yeah, I looked this one up. It was a box office bomb. And again, because I really hadn't known about this movie until we started talking about it offline here. But this was one of those ones that was heavily split between critics and audiences, where, looking at the numbers here, it has a 12% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but an 83% approval rating from Google users. So this one was super split. Sometimes you see a little bit of a difference between the critic reviews and the audience, or, not a gap at all. They're in sync, but this one was a big gap. So what do you kind of attribute to that? Is it, the critics were being too harsh? Are the audiences just eating up whatever they're given? What do you think is the cause for the split here?
I think it relies on the whole conceit of our podcast, and that is critics are stupid. I mean, really, I don't know, man. I don't know what critics maybe thought they were getting in this movie, but it's just I did not go back and read any Rotten Tomato reviews before doing this episodes, and now I'm kind of regretting, because I'm curious as to what they did say about it, because maybe it didn't spark whimsy or something. Maybe it could be expectation gets so high for people like a Penny Marshall, and when that happens and something comes out, it just doesn't hit the mark. It could be almost like I think last week's episode when we talked about Wonder Woman, and we were talking about expectation versus reality, and I think expectation can sometimes mar what the movie going experience for you. So sometimes it takes 2 or 3 views before you're like, that's a pretty decent movie. I don't know how many people watch movies several times. I don't know. You, a person who will watch, I've seen some movies. I've seen Renaissance Man, without exaggeration, probably 20 sometimes. It's a movie I can watch year after year, dude. And so I don't know, is that something you do? Like, if you see a movie and you're just like, that didn't hit the bar for me, do you maybe give it a second chance after that bar has been semi-lowered for you?
I think, if I don't like a movie the first time out, I don't really think I would like it the second time either. So I can't say I really do that, where I see a movie and I don't really like it and then I give it another shot, because there's just so many movies out there, and why would I watch the same movie again that I didn't really like that much? So, we all have our favorites that we watch a million times. I'm not sure if this is going to be one of them. I liked it. I think going in knowing that the reviews were so horrible, that the critics trashed this movie, I think that almost kind of helps you enjoy a little bit more, where you're rooting kind of against them, that you're like, well, look, this isn't that bad. Okay. Like, I've seen far worse than this. And I would certainly take that stance on Renaissance Man. So in talking about the movie, obviously we're talking about their first movie. We're talking about Mark Wahlberg here. What did you think of him in this one? Because, this was only a year before he starred in The Basketball Diaries, and then 2 years before he starred in Fear, which I think Fear is an underrated movie. But what did you think of his first kind of turn as an actor out of, I guess, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch?
Right. I mean, watching it now, knowing who Mark Wahlberg is and turned into, it's interesting to go back because Mark Wahlberg really got his start. He was a rapper or a really pop artist, let's be honest. Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch was more pop than rap, but and then he was a Calvin Klein underwear model, and he was had this whole, tough guy kind of act to him. And I like, this movie kind of toes the line of his tough guy persona, but it also, he gets he gets made fun of a lot in the movie. He plays kind of a guy who joins the army because his family's from the trailer park and all, and in Alabama and stuff like that. So, it showed that I think some actors who maybe have a persona that they want to keep, like rappers or something like that, they always want to play the tough guy, and they don't want to ever be dressed down or made fun of in a movie because they have this image to keep. So you could see kind of from that first role, yeah, exactly, that. So you can kind of see from like his first role, man, where he was just like, all right, maybe he definitely has an ego. You can tell Mark Wahlberg maybe has a little bit of an ego, but as an actor, he was willing to play the role. And I think that's an important thing for actors to do, because acting is playing the role. You have to have a little bit of humbleness to play the role, and he does. And it could have just been him wanting to be the tough guy throughout the movie, but he doesn't. And that is a long-winded way of saying he did a good job.
Yeah, you're sounding like a critic over there with your, long-winded explanation of just saying a guy was good. But no, I agree. I liked him in this too. And, I will say, do you think that since he did a decent enough job in this, was this the movie that got him these other roles that came shortly after that gave him like more room to breathe as an actor, such as The Basketball Diaries or Fear, which came soon after this one? Do you think this was like the key stepping stone, or did he kind of kill it in the auditions for the other movies and that's what got him the part? What do you think? Did he use this as leverage for the rest of his career?
I think if you can hold your own in a movie with like Danny DeVito is a titan of the industry, man. I think everybody loves and respects Danny DeVito, and he is an Academy Award nominated producer. He produced Aaron Brockovich, and so he was Academy Award nominated for that. And so if you can be in a movie where you hold your own against somebody like him, it does have people take notice. And it goes to your point earlier, the Rotten Tomatoes score versus the Google user score. People like this movie. And so I'm sure executives like this movie. If the audience was liking it, these executives probably go through and look at what it was that was in the movie that they liked. And I think Mark Wahlberg has one of the better of the Army cadets in this movie. He has one of the better roles, I would say. He was given a better chunk of dialogue, a better character to play than some of the other actors in it, and definitely helped propel him. I mean, you can't discount his other stuff that he was doing, his rapping, his underwear modeling and all. And his brother was Donnie Wahlberg, who was in like the biggest band of all time back then. So he definitely had a leg up when it came to wanting to get cast in movies. But again, Basketball Diaries came and he held his own against a young DiCaprio, but DiCaprio nonetheless. And then Fear comes along and he's in it with Reese Witherspoon, one of her earlier movies, and he knocks it out of the park. So I think it was just with each movie you saw Wahlberg getting better and better and better.
So let's kind of close this segment by saying this then. To his current day fans, the Mark Wahlberg hype is up right now because he's got a movie in theaters with Uncharted. Would you recommend this movie to someone who's a Mark Wahlberg fan? If you say, hey, check this out, you like Mark Wahlberg, so you'll like A, his part in this movie, and B, the movie in general, would you be able to recommend that to people?
Yeah, if we go as the movie as a whole, recommend to anybody who will listen. But if you want to just focus in on Mark Wahlberg fans, absolutely, because it is kind of his first role was really a different kind of role than you've ever really seen him play since then. It was kind of just this white trash podunk guy who joins the army to kind of get away from his almost white trash upbringing.
Well said. So speaking of Mark Wahlberg, let's get to our new movie review here with Uncharted, new adventure movie, co-starring with Tom Holland. So let's get into our new movie review of the week here. So here in our new movie review segment today, we're looking at Uncharted, which is, of course, based off of the PlayStation game. So this is a PlayStation movie. Interesting phrase there. But first, we like to start off these segments by just giving our initial spoiler-free impressions. And obviously, we have also our spoiler-free review video that we did a few days ago, if you want to check that out. If you want to click off now and come back after you've watched the movie to hear our in-depth spoiler review. But just initial impressions. Brad, what did you think? Because, you know, I have an opinion too, and we maybe line up kind of the same on this movie.
Yeah, I will preface it by saying I'm not a big video game player, so I never played the video game, don't know much about the video game, don't know the plot of the video game, so I'm able to watch the movie as a movie, and as a movie, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a really, really solid action adventure type movie. I thought, you know, it was cliched filled, but enjoyable.
Yeah, I'll agree with the most part for that. You know, my kind of one sentence summary of this movie for me was it was the mildest of the mids. You know, it was something that you enjoy for 2 hours and then you forget before you even get to your car. You know, it just, I think it was decent. I just didn't really think it really did anything original. You know, it was just kind of like, it was like a paint by numbers adventure movie. You know, it was like someone online said it best where the games are kind of paying homage to and copying off of Indiana Jones. So when you make a movie out of the games, which are paying homage to Indiana Jones, suddenly you get an Indiana Jones kind of knockoff ripoff. So to me, that's kind of what it felt like. It felt like a cycle of like, you know, tributes and, you know, kind of like stuff that was already done better in other movies. So I wouldn't say I hated it, but, you know, it was just kind of like, yeah, you know, it was good.
I agree with everything you say. However, I enjoyed it more than you seem to have, because I don't know, man. I think part of my enjoyment was, again, I saw this in IMAX or FOMAX, so as some people like to call it at AMC, but I didn't realize it was filmed with IMAX cameras. So when the frame opened up to fill the frame, for the airplane scene, and then the entire ending was filmed with IMAX cameras. As a film nerd, I love that. I love shifting aspect ratio. So when that happened, it took me above just enjoying the movie. I was just like, hell yeah, because I love IMAX ratio.
Yeah, I mean, personally, to me, when the film aspect ratio kind of like fluctuates back and forth, that kind of bothers me a little bit. But some people might not even know that exists. And sorry if now you can't unsee it. But yeah, look, I mean, maybe seeing it in IMAX would have made me enjoy it a little bit more. And if you can't tell, we're talking about the ending shot scene, IMAX cameras, you know, with the ships and the helicopters. So spoilers, but yeah, I think that was obviously the big action set piece of the movie, and I think it was pretty decent. You know, it kind of reminded me of like an Airborne Pirates of the Caribbean. Again, Uncharted really didn't do anything super different or original with the whole flying ships thing. Like that whole actual premise of like the ships being airlifted by helicopters, that was pretty original. But in terms of like people fighting on the ships, yeah, it didn't really do anything super original. But I think that was a pretty decent big action finale. But, you know, what else? What did you not like about the movie? Let's kind of start with that, because you seem to have nothing but positive things to say about it, but this wasn't a movie that really blew you away.
It didn't blow me away. Yeah, it's not, I mean, I can't say whether it'll make my top 20 at the end of the year that I do every year. It may make it, depending on what else comes out this year. I did enjoy it, and honestly, I don't know. I think leaving the theater, I was like, it was good, but I think I kept thinking about it after I saw it, and the more I thought about it, the more I actually liked it because of that ending scene and stuff. But to answer your question, 20 minutes later, the things I didn't like, I do have a couple. One, Antonio Banderas seems to have taken this movie for the money because his character was what was the purpose of his character having a big name star, Academy Award nominee star in that movie to be murdered and without doing anything. So I didn't really like that. I wanted more Banderas. Two, I don't like the contrivance that a lot of movies do where they open on the big action scene and then they cut back to 18 years or 5 years or 2 weeks previous and start the movie there. I don't like, and then like in the middle of the movie, when then we get back to that big action scene, it just seems like a cheap way to get people into the movie. It's like, just have confidence that the story you're telling is interesting enough and you can start on that 18-year earlier scene. And three, to your point, it was cliched filled. It checked every box that you expected it to check off. I didn't hate that as much as you did. So go, what'd you hate and all that stuff?
Yeah, so that was a lot to unpack. So kind of dealing with that first point with Antonio Banderas, I do agree with you because, I thought he was pretty good as the villain. He was kind of like a mustache twirling villain, like, oh, I'm threatening and I'm going to get you. And, it was a little bit silly to some people maybe, but again, I thought it fit with the tone of the movie and I didn't really fault him as something I didn't really like about Uncharted. But yeah, I did not really like that twist of him getting killed off like 2/3 or halfway through the movie. And boy, they didn't really help themselves when you see different shots of him getting his throat slit. And it looks like someone just took a permanent marker and just kind of like drew a line on his neck. There was no like injury. There was no blood. There was no nothing. And they even show a shot like kind of over top of him looking down at the body. And there's still like no blood for a guy who got his throat slit. And I get it's a PG-13 movie, but there have been movies out there that have found really creative ways to show a lot of violence without having actually shown it and get away with it. So I just like that to me was super lame and really took me out of the movie for a second. But yeah, it was a shame I didn't really get to see him be the main villain for the whole thing. But number two, your point that you had is that kind of opened in the middle and then it started in the past. I don't mind that because it's definitely a filmmaking device where you hit the ground running and then you get all the action leading up to where you saw, and then after that is all new stuff. So I guess it's a personal preference. I don't really dislike that as much in terms of a filmmaking device to kind of open in the middle really quick and then start at the beginning. It's just like, it's fun to tell a little bit of out of order sometimes. So, and then, we're both been going on for so long here. What was the third point that you made?
Just the cliches, just the checked every box that you had already kind of hinted at. It just checked the adventure box.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I'd say if you want to watch a good adventure treasure hunting movie, that you watch the classic National Treasure, because I think they did what this movie was trying to do a lot better. Clues of the past have been hidden for hundreds of years and you got to track the trail and one clue leads to another and it's all part of history. The cast is being led by this historical expert who's the main character. I would say National Treasure did it a lot better and really towed the line a lot better between being just like a fun, it's not super smart, but it's super entertaining movie. And Uncharted was just kind of like, kind of put you to sleep at some parts.
Yeah, I think this might be a split decision for us. I think I definitely liked it a lot more than you seem to. So did you say you did play the video games or you didn't play the video games?
I did not. I had roommates in college who played them, so I got kind of like bits and pieces of the story here and there. And I will say from what I remember that they are very cinematic games. And, those games I think pride themselves on their story and, their characters, which I don't really know because I'm getting mixed reactions. I'm seeing a lot of mixed reactions for Uncharted for this movie for people who have played the game. Some really liked it and some hated it as fans of the video games. So I will say I didn't play them, but it seems like people are kind of maybe split on having played the games and then seeing this movie.
Right. I've seen a lot of people talk about like Tom Holland seems like he is just way too young to be playing the Drake character or whatever. And yeah, I get that. He does still seem like, I guess a lot of people still have him from Spider-Man where he's playing, a high school age kid or whatever. I don't know how old Tom Holland is in real life, probably in his 20s, I assume. So I did see him a little bit young to be this big suave action guy in this movie. It didn't play as well as his action movie Spider-Man, which makes more sense as a high school age kid. But it didn't take me out of it too much, I don't think.
I think even without having played the games, knowing general knowledge about them, I think Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg were horribly miscast as the characters that they were supposed to be portraying. I don't think they were terrible in this movie. Just to sum it up in 2 quick sentences, I thought Tom Holland was good with what he had, and I thought when he was doing some stunt work, that was the best parts of the movie in terms of the action and his ability. And Mark Wahlberg, I felt like, I agree with a lot of people saying that he was just kind of playing himself. I agree with that for him in this bump. But I will say, having known a little bit of knowledge about the game, horribly miscast leads. Would have much rather seen, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. We'll put a little card on the top here if you're watching this on YouTube. Check out the Nathan Fillion fan film where he plays the same character, Nathan Drake, in a short film with, I'm blanking on the actor's name right now, but who plays Sully. Stephen Lang plays Sully, the older kind of veteran guy who Mark Wahlberg was playing in Uncharted. That fan film did a much better job of casting and getting the look and feel than I think Uncharted did. So if you haven't seen that, Brad and the audience members, go check that out, because I think in hindsight, it kind of makes Uncharted, this studio movie, look a little bit worse.
Yeah, no, didn't even know that existed. 2 great actors, I think. I like Stephen Lang a lot. If you've ever seen the Don't Breathe movies, he's really good in those. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I think another thing was I went into, and usually I go into a movie and I know everything there is to know about it, but I actually didn't realize that this was a Ruben Fleischer movie. And I do like Ruben Fleischer for the most part. He did one movie, 30 minutes or less, I wasn't a big fan of, but like Zombieland 1 and 2, I absolutely love those movies. The original Venom, I enjoy the Venom movies. I know that those can be divisive, but I enjoyed them for what they were. And Gangster Squad, another movie that a lot of people hated, I enjoyed Gangster Squad. So I'm a fan of Ruben Fleischer's movies.
Yeah, to me, Uncharted definitely kind of fits the bill for Ruben Fleischer, because you're talking a lot about, you named a lot of the movies that he directed. And for me, these are all movies where like they have camps of people that hate them, camps of people that love them. And some of these movies, people are just kind of like Uncharted, they call it the mildest of the mids, where they're just kind of there, and it's just a perfectly pleasant way to kill 2 hours, and then you immediately forget about what you saw. So that kind of fits the bill that he would direct Uncharted. Yeah, he definitely had some good ones. I'm a big fan of Zombieland. I can't say I've seen the second one, but this definitely kind of fits the bill, I think, looking at his filmography and the other movies that he's made, and this kind of, I think, slots in pretty well with those.
Yeah, well, check out Double Tap. Double Tap's one of the rare sequels that's actually really good. I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of what we can cover about this movie, in all honesty. So I'm going to ask the question this time. The ending of the movie sets up a sequel. Are you a person who's looking forward to the sequel, and would you recommend people seeing this movie?
Yes, looking forward to sequels, but change everything. And would I recommend this to people? I think just a regular average moviegoer who isn't really a fan of the games, who just wants to go see a movie on a Friday night. I guess I can say I can. Again, it's not bad. It's not great. It's just, it's a perfectly pleasant way to kill 2 hours, which, to me is just a little bit frustrating because, the source material is good and this could have been better. but it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. And you know what? That's good enough for a lot of people these days. So I guess I can say that I could recommend it to somebody if they asked. And I really don't think I would tune in for a sequel if they just kind of like copied and pasted this one. I think there's other stuff I'd rather spend my time watching.
Right on. I am looking forward to sequels from this. I would recommend seeing this in theaters if you go to the IMAX because of the shifting aspect ratio is going to get me every time. I'm a film proponent. There's a whole world out there, digital versus film. A great documentary that Keanu Reeves made called Side by Side about the difference between film and digital, and it's got Robert Rodriguez, Martin Scorsese, it's produced by Keanu Reeves, and he goes and interviews all these people. If you're a film nerd like me, watch it. It's phenomenal, and it talks about, Christopher Nolan talks about shooting with film IMAX cameras and all that stuff, and I am a sucker for IMAX cameras. I absolutely love the shifting ratios, and they don't release a lot of them on Blu-ray anymore for the shifting aspect ratios. It's one thing Christopher Nolan does so well, is like he gets his movies always come with those on the Blu-ray. So again, long-winded way of saying I enjoyed it. Right now there's really not a ton of like phenomenal movies out there in theaters. I mean, it's getting ready to change. We're getting ready to have, the Batman and all these movies coming out, but if you're looking, when this episode drops, if you're looking for something to do that night after you listen to this or watch this or whatever, there are worse ways to spend time than going to see this flick in theaters.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think we're completely split on this. I think we just kind of argue about the nitpicky of like the level of quality here. And I think that's fair because again, like you said, it's a little bit of slow time with movies right now. I think, maybe when we start to get into like mid to late March is when some of the movies start to ramp up and we're getting, some bigger name titles here. And, if somebody really wants to go see a movie on a Friday night out and this is one of the few that kind of appeals to them, I don't think they're going to regret it. It's just, again, like it could have been better. And, again, kind of wasted a little bit of the source material from what I'm hearing. I haven't played the games, but, I would be up for watching a sequel if they just put a little bit more love and care into it, just like maybe a little bit better writing, just like sticking with like the theme and the dialogue and the other stuff from the games a little bit more. And I mean, you can't really undo the casting of Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, like I think both those guys would have been better if they put older actors in both those roles. But, if they just took a little bit more care with it, maybe I might go see a sequel. I mean, who knows if it's going to get greenlit, remains to be seen. But, again, if they just take a little more time with it, maybe I'll go see it.
I'd be surprised if they don't greenlight a sequel. I believe it knocked it out of the park, and it's in box office right now. I think it did really good numbers when it's opening weekend. So I'd be quite surprised if they're not clamoring for more right now.
I will say, as like a movie, just a regular old movie, just objectively, I can't say it's really the best or the worst, but as a video game movie, because God knows there aren't that many good ones out there, I will say that this is a good video game movie. A movie based off of a video game. I will say that is a good video game movie. Just a good plain movie in general. Could go either way. But I will say, because there have been so many bad video game movies, that I think this one is definitely one of the more solid ones out there. So thank you to everybody for watching, listening, another episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show. What did you think about Uncharted? Feel free to let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to do all the YouTube things, to like, comment, subscribe, share, whatever. So we really appreciate it. And same to the people if you're listening on any one of the audio platforms that we're on. We certainly appreciate that as well. So you heard our opinions on it. Feel free to form your own. And Brad, what are we up to next week? We're kind of shifting gears from 2 straight mustache origin movies these past couple weeks. So I don't think that's what we're covering next week.
No, man. It looks like next week's episode is a big one. It's a biggie. It looks like it's going to be the Batman.
Yeah, so I highly doubt we're going to get another mustache origin story in the Batman. That would truly just boggle the mind if that just came out of nowhere, because I'm not really seeing anything like that in the trailers right now. But it is something that I am very much looking forward to and can't wait to talk about next week. We're going to talk about the Batman at full length and have a non-spoiler review out for you for that one as well on Monday. So thank you everybody again for tuning in. Another episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show, and we hope to see you again next week.